Hey guys, Mr. Hyatt here. This is the AP Biology Chapter 3 lecture, as you can see on the screen. It's about water and all the ways that water affects life. So we need to start with a discussion about water because it's everywhere. It's the most common molecule in all living cells. Most cells are 70 to 95% water, our bodies included. We live on a water planet, which means that more than 70% of our surface is covered in water. So it's going to impact us internally and externally in essentially an infinite number of ways. So there are several properties of water that we need to be comfortable with. A lot of it is really things that you have learned in chemistry and biology. We just need to remember and maybe take a little bit more depth, but focus on definitions and examples like you see on the screen, and understand the basic properties of water. So liquid water anyway, is cohesive. So anytime you're talking about cohesiveness, you're talking about sticking to itself. Think about when you turn on a drinking fountain. The water doesn't spray everywhere, it sticks together in a pretty good stream. Same thing when water comes out of a hose, it sticks together pretty well. And that's because of the polarity of the water. We get those partial positives, partial negatives, that's going to cause cross-linkage, and the water is going to stick to itself. Liquid water is also adhesive for the same reason. Water is going to stick to other molecules. So think about when you wash your car, if you don't apply wax, you get water running off, sticking to your car. So the water is going to stick to other molecules as well, again, because of that positive and negative partial charges that we talked about in the last chapter. We'll get to this later in the year, but seems appropriate to talk about right now. If you see, these are tree rings. Water transport in trees is going to use cohesion and adhesion to pull that water from the soil all the way up to the leaves and all the places in these high altitudes where the water is needed. Another basic property, water has a high surface tension. It's difficult to stretch or break the surface of water. Of course, we can jump off the diving board and we don't have to worry about bouncing off of it. The surface tension isn't that high. But you see there are organisms that can skip across the water. Again, hydrogen bonding gives it strength. Water has a high specific heat. You've felt this if you've ever jumped in a lake outside here in Indiana. It's especially in the springtime, or in the winter time. Late fall, maybe not the winter time. But usually the air temperature is warmer than the water in the spring. It takes the water a little while to warm up. Then the inverse is true in the fall. The water stays warm while the air gets cool faster. And again, that's hydrogen bonding. It holds heat. It causes the molecule to be static. I've used the word heat several times. Here's our definition: total quantity of kinetic energy due to molecular motion. So keep that in mind. Molecular motion. We're not talking about temperature here, we're talking about heat. Related topics, but not identical. Here's temperature. Average speed of these molecules. So they're certainly related. One measures the amount of energy, one measures the speed. So we'll talk a lot more about the distinction between those two eventually. We use Celsius here in science. At 0 Celsius, water freezes. At 100, water boils. We're obviously a little closer to freezing than boiling, and that works out pretty well for us. So water stabilizes temperature, meaning water can absorb and store heat. It moderates the climate. I've got a picture here that shows what I'm talking about. This is California, and sorry, the text kind of runs over itself here. But the ocean water is going to store some heat, so it keeps the beach cooler than the inland areas. Check out Palm Springs here is at 106. San Diego's at 72, so that's a pretty significant difference. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, Mr. Hyatt, that's a little bit dishonest because there are also winds coming off of the ocean. I wonder if that's connected to a difference in temperature in any way. We'll talk more about weather patterns later. But water certainly stabilizes the temperature, holds heat in, doesn't allow it to penetrate. Land does not do the same thing. Something that athletes are aware of in the summertime especially, water has a high heat of vaporization. There's a definition there: the quantity of heat a liquid must absorb for 1 gram of it to convert to a gaseous state. Here's a picture of an old school tennis player experiencing that. When we sweat, we're vaporizing our water. Luckily, it doesn't just sit on us, it evaporates. Result: water cools an organism from excessive heat buildup. Again, hydrogen bonding allows that. So when water freezes, it expands. When water freezes, the distance between the molecules increases, which again is caused by hydrogen bonding. I hope you're noticing a trend here. So that hydrogen bonding pushes the molecules further apart and makes the water itself a little bit bigger. Here's a picture of that. You see that increased cross-linkage. The molecules are moving around less because they're colder, so they make more hydrogen bonds. It makes them stable. We don't have hydrogen bonds constantly breaking and reforming like we do in liquid water. I've been throwing around these terms of solid, liquid, and gas. Here's what we mean. I know you guys have a basic understanding here, but in a solid, we're going to see things really close together, usually. Now, that's not the case in water because we spread apart and we get hydrogen bonding. Liquids are anything that is dynamic, is fluid. So the molecules are going to be a little further apart and they're going to move around a ton. And of course, we know gases, molecules are spaced way out and moving around like crazy. So that's one reason that aquatic life can live under ice. The water is frozen up here at the top. It's really dense. It's really stable. Underneath, we've got this liquid water that's moving around and has dissolved oxygen and all those types of things. So aquatic life can often live under ice. Next trait is that water is a great solvent, meaning we can dissolve a lot of things in it. And again, of course, that's going to be because of hydrogen bonding. What else? But that partial negative and partial positive makes it really friendly to ionic compounds dissolving, things like salt. But also the fact that it's a covalent bond itself makes it work well with covalent molecules. So it works really well as a solvent for lots of different types of molecules. Kind of some definitions here. Remember, a solution is a homogeneous mixture of two or more substances. So we've mixed things together evenly. The solvent is the thing is the liquid. Usually, it's the water. In the scenario we talked through, it's always the material in greater quantity. The solute is the opposite. So if we're making salt water, or if we're making Kool-Aid, the water is the solvent. The solute is the Kool-Aid powder. The Kool-Aid powder. Sorry. Something that's going to play a huge role in this course all year long is hydrophilicity and hydrophobicity. So things that are hydrophilic dissolve in water. They like water. Hydro, of course, means water, and phile or philic means to like or love. If something is hydrophilic, remember that it has a polar region or an ionic region for hydrogen bonds. So there's some sort of positive, negative charge that allows it to associate with water. Hydrophobic molecules repel water. So they're almost always nonpolar covalent bonds. You know that lipids like oils and fats don't mix with water, and that's because they are nonpolar covalent bonds, so they can't dissolve as well. Here's an example of hydrophilic materials. You see the water molecules buzzing around these ions. They can bond with the partial positives and the partial negatives, and we can dissolve, is what I'm trying to say. Another example, more applicable here to biology, but we get our protein and our water. It's going to associate with it. So this is going to be huge in the cell membrane, and I know you learned that as freshmen, but That's going to be really important when we talk about cell signaling, when we talk about all kinds of stuff. This is going to come up a lot throughout the course of this year. Life basically would not be possible without water, and there are several things that we need to talk around to get at this point and to make some meaning out of this point. Solution concentration is usually based on molarity, and hopefully that sounds familiar from chemistry. Molarity, of course, is the number of moles of solute per liter of solution. That's going to be important when we start talking about, again, cell structure and cell membrane and all those types of things. To convert to molecules, we need to talk about Avogadro. Your head is probably spinning from that last year or so. But we need to be able to calculate all those things. We need to still be able to do all those calculations from chemistry. And I'll give you a handout that'll help with that once you get back to class this fall. That shows the heart of chemistry and how we can make conversions. So I'll help you with that, but just don't let that slip from your memory. Hopefully you've seen a picture sort of like this. This is 1 mole of each of these things, so it sort of goes back to the pound of bricks, pound of feathers old adage. Weighs the same, is still 1 mole, but it's different sizes. It's going to be a whole bunch of feathers. It's going to be just a couple of bricks. So, like I said, make sure you can calculate solutions and molarity, moles, number of molecules, all those types of things. So water can sometimes split into 2 ions, hydroxide OH and hydronium, which is H3O, which is going to be slightly acidic. In pure water, the concentration of each is 10 to the negative 7th. So essentially, in pure water, we're talking about very small amounts of these, but there are some. It's going to dissociate. It's going to break into those smaller molecules. Again, we're getting positives and negatives, so that's going to affect how good of a solvent it is. It's going to affect anything that it comes in contact with in terms of electronegativity and electron, valence electrons like we talked in the last chapter. Yeah, that's pretty much what I just said. So acids, there are several definitions, as you know. The definition that we're going to operate with are going to be things that release hydrogen when dissolved in water, especially. HCl is going to release hydrogen, form H plus and Cl minus, and so that's what we're going to call acids. You know about acid rain, releasing hydrogens, dissolving things that are like this limestone statue, killing things like trees because they're acids. Bases, on the other hand, are going to be things that can absorb hydrogen. Like it says there, you can often reduce hydrogen ions by producing hydroxides. And there's an example of NaOH dissolving and dissociating into OH and Na+. So we call sodium hydroxide a base. Neutrals are going to be things that don't fit either of those categories, and we'll deal with lots of those later on in the year. pH scale, I'm confident you know all about the pH scale. pH of 0 is really super acidic. pH of 14 is really super basic. Most things are here in the middle. Of course, 7 is neutral. Here's a calculation of pH. We're not overly concerned with calculating pH. We need to be okay with that calculation, but I don't expect you to do a whole bunch of calculations on pH. Quickly, notice that each pH unit is a 10 times change in H+. That's been on the AP exam many times. That's something that you need to understand. The difference between 3 and 4 isn't a difference in 1 hydrogen ion. It's a 10 times change in the concentration of hydrogen. So if we know our pH or our pOH, they have to add up to 14. So if we know one, we can calculate the other. Last but not least, got 30 seconds. Buffers are going to be things that resist pH shifts. That they absorb hydrogen, they absorb hydroxides, so that the cell or whatever the important vessel doesn't feel those effects. There's our summary, and that's water.